I launched my own private label clothing brand 8 years ago, and it's one of the best things I ever did in my entire life. Now, 8 years later, I have a new brand that I'm launching this fall. So this video is inspired by me strategically planning the launch of my own new clothing brand in fall 2024 and avoiding the 5 biggest mistakes that clothing brands make when they launch their clothing brand. The first gigantic mistake that clothing brands make when they launch their brand is launching too soon or launching too late. There's a sweet spot in the development of your brand when you want to launch it. If you launch your brand too soon and your website's not polished, your clothing brand concept isn't really honed and figured out yet, the impression that you're going to give people right from the beginning is going to sewer you. It's going to give you a really bad impression from the beginning that you could have leveraged for future repeat customers, for word of mouth, and you need your brand to be developed to a certain point before you launch your brand. So this idea of launching as quickly as possible is true, but you don't want to launch too soon to the point where you're launching and your website's half developed and you're just trying to get your products out there to sell. It needs to be mastered to a certain extent before you launch your brand. The foundational elements, and what we're talking about here is your website quality, your brand concept, your product quality, and your social media all need to be staged to a standard that is acceptable so that when people come across it, your brand looks credible. But another thing that you don't want to do is launch your brand too late, where you've been developing your brand behind the scenes for 3 years and you finally launch it and you realize the product market fit isn't right and you've got to change everything. And you wasted 3 years of working on this brand and perfecting this brand without getting any feedback to adjust it and master the product market fit. So as a general rule of thumb, the perfect time to launch your brand is where you've mastered the foundation enough to the point where everything looks credible, but you're not wasting time on unnecessary features and things that you just don't really need to launch your brand. Like if you're working on some cart feature and all these things on your website that just are like bonuses and add-ons for your brand, and they're taking an extra year or two for you to master, you're just delaying the process. Don't do that. Just launch with the bare bones of your brand and start getting feedback on it, and you can add all of those things as you go. The second big mistake that clothing brands make is worrying too much about whether they're doing a soft launch, a hard launch, and just how they're launching their brand in general. Most new brands that are starting up don't have a massive audience on social media yet to leverage and to strategically launch to anyways. And so if you get all caught up on the launch day and how exactly you're going to get this thing out there, it can really stifle you and hold you back from just getting your brand out there and launching. Unless you have a gigantic audience that you can come up with some strategic plan to hit that audience in the best way possible, likely it doesn't really make a huge difference if you're doing a soft launch or a hard launch when you're launching your brand. The day that you launch your brand is the day that your site goes live and people can place orders on your website. Don't overthink it. Just make those posts, get your brand out there, and start working on it. Now, really quickly before we get into the 3 biggest mistakes that clothing brands make when they launch their brand, and I'm going to try to avoid these at all costs, Apparel Success is sponsored by my buds over at BrandCrowd. BrandCrowd's a logo maker tool. You type in the name of the logo that you want, smack that enter button. Thousands of logos are going to come up. You choose a logo that you like, then you can edit and refine that logo as long as you want for free until it's perfect. This is a hundo P design I made for my own clothing brand using BrandCrowd. If you're interested, head over to brandcrowd.com/apparel success and you get up to 66% off at checkout. The third biggest mistake you can make when you're launching your clothing brand, and please God avoid this at all costs, is releasing too many products. This is probably the most common thing that I've seen over the past 8 years working with other brands, is brand owners sometimes get it in their head for some reason that in order for them to launch their brand, they have to have like a huge wide range of products. And they have this hang up over the idea of launching a clothing brand with only 2, 3, 4 different products. Like that there's something wrong with that or that there's something bad about that. But in reality, that's actually going to be super beneficial for you. The less products that you release, the better for your clothing brand when you're first starting. There are a few big reasons for this that I want you to think about. The first one is that it helps keep your brand consistent. The less products that you release, the easier it is to keep a tight brand image. The wider that you go with products, the more likelihood you're opening yourself up to some sort of error in the designs and keeping it nice and tight. And that's what a good brand is it looks really tight and it has that cohesion to a certain brand concept. The second thing is that it keeps you more flexible. If you release a whole ton of products and say you stock inventory in those products and you don't sell out of a whole bunch of them, now you can't really move around and be as flexible with releasing new products. You've got to sell through that inventory in order to open up cash. If you release less products, you can, hey, I released the wrong products, scratch those, I'm gonna come out with some more products, and it keeps you way more flexible. So in that sense, it saves you money and it minimizes risk, and it keeps you just wide open to get some feedback on your brand and the products that you like the most, see how it's doing, and you can move forward from there without being tied down and pigeonholed with all of this inventory that you invested in. The fourth biggest mistake that clothing brands make when they launch their brand is having no follow-up after the day that they launch their brand. We get so caught up in this big launch day, and we almost have it in our heads that there's going to be this chain reaction where after the day that we launch, there's going to be this word of mouth that snowballs forward in this infinite chain reaction where we never need to market our brand again. And that's completely unrealistic. It's almost like somebody getting so excited for their wedding day and not realizing that they're getting married to this person for the rest of their lives, and that their marriage actually starts the day that they get back from their honeymoon. Like, that's when they should start working on their marriage and enjoying it. But a lot of people get hung up on this launch day, and they don't realize that all of the results for their brand are really going to come from after the day of launch, what you do from then on for the next 2, 3, 4 years, having a good marketing strategy. So after the day of launch, already have a plan for how you're going to be consistent on social media, how you're going to actually drill this thing in and keep it going moving forward, because that spark will die really fast after that launch day if you don't have a plan to follow up after it. And number 5, the fifth biggest mistake, I want you to remember this. The number one problem in marketing is underestimating the difficulty of the task at hand. A lot of clothing brand owners do not understand the difficulty of the task that they are undertaking trying to market a clothing brand. And so without knowing this, they have some sort of delusional belief about how their brand's marketing is going to go. They don't put in enough effort or treat it with enough effort that it needs and requires. And so they get really, really discouraged, and they give up really, really soon on their brand because they don't understand that this is like something that takes incredible strategy, a ton of consistency, and a really, really hard effort. So when it comes to marketing your brand in general after the day of launch, don't underestimate the difficulty of the task at hand. Understand that there's a major competitive landscape here with hundreds and hundreds of other clothing brands starting up every single day, and you're one of those clothing brands trying to gain market share, trying to be the purple cow where you stand out in a field of all the other brands that are just doing the same thing. And so you really need to treat it like that in order to get above average results. Let me know what you're working on in the comments below. I'm curious to hear about the brand that you're starting and when you plan on launching. It'd be cool to see when everybody's launching. And I really hope that this helps you launch your brand. If you're thinking about starting up a brand or you're already running one, check out the Apparel Success Mastermind. It's a monthly subscription where you get direct access to me, access to a community of other clothing brand owners, access to all of my courses, and we do exclusive live streams in there every single month. You can learn more at apparelsuccessmastermind.com. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.